I don't think you really can teach anybody anything. I think all you can do is motivate them to want to learn on themselves, and then structure the material so it's easier for students to organize it in their own
I
mind.
get it. What was Brown's reputation like back then?
I mean, I hate to use the word, we were sort of precious. And
Precious. Is that the word?
precious,
Hmm.
yeah. I think we were thought of as sort of a junior cousin to the big school up in Cambridge near us.
Hmm.
We didn't really have the reputation we have now of being different and friendlier and looser. In the 60s, there was a lot of student unrest, which was good. And Brown responded by a very flexible, student-oriented curriculum, very much a sense of giving students freedom and autonomy. At Brown, it worked. You know this better than I do. But number one, students responded very well to being given an opportunity to choose their courses, to choose their curriculum. We all of a sudden attracted people, I hate to say it, people like yourself that were innovative and creative and wanted to do things their way. And it really made our campus a very exciting place, and it's continued to be a very exciting place. The other schools we like to compare ourselves with came out of that period by basically reverting back to what they were before, and we didn't.
Do you mind if I turn you into a cartoon for this
No,
for just like a few seconds? Is that okay?
yeah.
Okay, cool. I'll do that. It's just a little fun thing,
Yeah,
like
yeah.
animation thing that is fun to do. Dr. Barrett Hazeltine has been a faculty member at Brown University since 1959, where he's taught courses in management and engineering. He served a 20-year term as associate dean of the college from 1972 to 1992. He has a master's in engineering from Princeton and a PhD in philosophy from the University of Michigan. Among his many achievements, he founded engineering programs in Zambia, Malawi, Botswana, and Zimbabwe. After winning the Senior Award for teaching 12 consecutive years, Brown renamed it the Barrett Hazeltine Award for Excellence in Teaching in 1985. I had the honor of taking his renowned managerial courses, ENGIN 9 and 90, and was one of his teaching assistants during my Brown tenure. Professor, thank you so much for being here.
I'm honored to be here.
Yeah, it's an honor to have you, and I really appreciate your time this morning. So I'd love to get us kicked off. I know we haven't chatted in quite a few years, but if we could get kicked off, I'd love to do sort of retrospective on your life, your teaching career, all of your many accomplishments. And if we could get started, I think going back to the start, one thing I learned about you in my research, and I never knew this when I was at Brown, but that you're actually born in Paris in 1931. Did you pick up any French when you were a little kid?
No, it was only there till about 2 years old. Yeah, it was sort of the time of the expatriates. So uh, my parents decided that they would like to live in France for a while, and so they went over. Actually, the story is a little longer, but that's basically it.
Mm,
Uh,
yeah, nice. And then you finally moved to the States. Your father was an inventor, right? And y'all moved to Hoboken when you were about 3 years old.
yeah, he was a radio inventor. He was also a academic at a place called Stevens Institute, which is uh, in Hoboken on the river. And so we lived on campus until I was about 12, I think. And it ended up having 4 siblings, so family got big, so we moved to the suburbs.
Hmm, nice. And what kind of stuff? Do you remember any of your father's inventions?
Yeah, yeah, it was called the Nutridyne. I don't know how much you want to get in the weeds, but it was the first example really of what's called negative feedback. The trouble was that the uh, radios in those days had a lot of what you call positive feedback, and that made them, whistle or sing. You know what happens when they set up public address systems. The signal gets re-amplified and re-amplified, and so it
Hmm.
takes over. And it turns out the radio receivers could do that. And so my father's contribution was to put in a so-called neutralizing capacitor, neutralizing device, which eliminated the the positive feedback. And actually, the radio was really quite successful for perhaps 10 years. It was really the only home-based radio that worked. Later on, the technology improved, so the feedback disappeared.
Gotcha. Yeah, and then he must have instilled a sense of, you went into engineering later, but I'm sure he fostered that sense of learning and inspiration, and you have a couple of inventions yourself, right?
Actually, only one of interest. Brown graduate ran a company called U.S. Billiards, which was pool tables, coin-operated pool tables. Problem with a coin-operated pool table is that when you scratch, when the cue ball goes down into one of the pockets, you get the cue ball back. So the question was, how do you identify the cue ball compared to all the other balls? The technology at the time was either to make the ball larger or smaller, but that wasn't quite perfect because it didn't bounce right off the cushions, or to somehow put a weight in there to make the cue ball heavier. But the trouble with that is the weight had to be exactly in the center and of the cue ball, or otherwise it wouldn't go where it's supposed to go. So we invented a pretty simple device that used lights. We didn't have LEDs in those times, but something like LEDs to reflect off the ball and all that. Big problem was the 9-ball. The 9-ball is yellow and striped, so you didn't get much contrast.
Gotcha. So wait, is that the color patent that you have?
Yeah, right.
Is that the one that's for the billiards?
Yeah.
Color. Okay, cool. Yeah, I was looking at that in your research. So you're a young man in Hoboken, and I read that one of your first interests in managing was in managing your friend's high school football team.
Yeah. How did you find that out?
Oh, I do my research, Professor.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah.
Yeah. I do a lot of research for these interviews. So, yeah, I mean, I find that kind of stuff, and these kind of details. Obviously, we're gonna get to your teaching career, your time at Brown, everything like that. But I find the audience really likes to hear these stories, so especially I like to hear people growing up, your origin story. You know, the things that like influenced your later life. So, so are you like a bit of like a football, like a tactician? You were coming up with strategies.
Yeah, it was fun, and all my friends were big jocks, sort of like you, and so it was a chance to be with them, and it was it was a chance to sort of see how organizations work. Coach didn't really like administration, so he just let me do a lot of stuff on my own.
That's cool. Okay, great. So then after that, you you met your wife, Mary, and you moved to Ann Arbor, I believe, after that. And she got her master's degree in chemistry, and you started having kids as well. And then I found out that in 1959, you moved to Providence, and you thought it was going to be a temporary teaching position. You ended up spending over 60 years in Providence. What was that like? Do you recall sort of your early career as a teacher?
Well, let me go back one step.
Oh, sure.
It's sort of a cute story.
Yeah.
When I was a graduate student in Michigan, I went in to talk one of the associate deans. I was looking at offers from Brown and George Washington University, in DC, and Dartmouth, and some other schools I've forgotten. And so we were having sort of a friendly conversation. All of a sudden, he stopped. He said, "No, well, this is silly. You go to the best place you can because in the academic world, you can only go down. And so what I took away from that is go to Brown, but if it doesn't work out, you'll be able to go somewhere else. So
Right.
we didn't really unpack everything that first couple of years.
You didn't get too comfortable. I get. What was Brown's reputation like back then?
Well, I don't know how to say this nicely. I think we were thought of as sort of a junior cousin to the big school up in Cambridge near us.
Mm,
We didn't really have the reputation we have now of being different and friendlier and looser. And I mean, I hate to use the word, we were sort of precious. And
precious. Is that the word?
precious,
Mm,
yeah. And really hadn't come into our own. And the engineering school again was small, but very good in 2 or 3 fields, and not electrical. But so in the academic world, we were well thought of, but weren't terribly attractive to high school students interested in studying engineering.
mm,
Uh, and you know all of this that in the 60s there was a lot of student unrest and which was good, and Brown responded by a very flexible student-oriented curriculum, and very much a sense of giving students freedom and autonomy. And at Brown, it worked. You know this better than I do, but number one, students responded very well to being given an opportunity to choose their courses, to choose their curriculum, and we all of a sudden attracted people, I hate to say it, people like yourself that were innovative and creative and wanted to do things their way. And it really made our campus a very exciting place, and has continued to be a very exciting place. The other schools we like to compare ourselves with came out of that period by basically reverting back to what they were before, and we didn't. We just stuck with a flexible, I can't think of a good word for free
yeah.
curriculum in a free environment.
Mm-mm.
And you know that, of course, better than I do. But now,
A liberal arts kind of. No, I mean, I completely agree. That's one thing that I don't know. I can't really compare it to any other college experience. I was only at Brown for 4 years, but certainly talking to friends that went to other colleges, other places, the emphasis on the education being the prime focus, which seems pretty obvious if it's a university, but the flexibility, I think, to craft your own experience and get a variety. They really, I mean, there's an emphasis on trying things out and not being stuck down one rabbit hole, one route. Most of the concentrations, at least when I was there, had pretty low course requirements. So I was an econ major, so I had I think 9 credits out of 32. So once you get that 9, you can take more econ, but I might have, but a big emphasis on spreading out and getting a wide variety of experiences, which I think is
experimenting,
really useful.
that's what people really need. And if a student chooses to be in a course, then she or he owns that course.
Right.
And if he or she is told you have to take this, then it's a chore. But if you decided you wanted to take an engineering course like this, when I'm teaching, then you feel a commitment to get something out of it.
Hmm. Yeah. Absolutely. And even like the emphasis
And
on like, oh, sorry, after you.
no, no, I'm just going to say that some criticism. Well, students will not diversify. Will take all their courses in one subject and all that. And there are a handful of students that do that. But in general, the breadth of courses that our students take is really much higher now than when we used to assign distribution requirements.
Mm.
Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
No, no, you're great. Yeah, I agree. And even something like the emphasis on shopping period at Brown, I'm sure that's still a thing. But I remember learning about that, and I mean, I had that down to a science by like my sophomore year. You know, I was going to the first week of class of every semester. I'd go to every class period
Yeah,
to try out different professors. You know, test the waters in completely disparate disciplines because we
right.
had the opportunity to, and Brown encouraged that kind of exploration, which is great to hear they still do. And I think it's funny you say our big sibling in Cambridge. There is like this kind of this feeling that there is like a little bit of a chip on the shoulder of the Brown student because you know we went to an amazing school, a fantastic college, but then we also have in the back of our heads like, oh, but it's not Harvard, you know. We kind of have
Yeah,
that thing, but it's obviously a great place to go.
yeah, but at least as the expression goes, we're a choice, not an echo. Uh,
Mm,
and we really do have our own ethos and our own strengths. Uh,
yeah.
yeah, we can go on and on forever like this. The benefit of giving students freedom is you attract particular students that really want to make use of that freedom, and you know what I'm trying to get at.
Yeah.
It's really a good reason to come to Brown for some students, and of course there are students who just uh, don't like having choices, don't like being responsible, and let them go to Harvard. Uh,
Yeah, they could take them. I agree.
yeah,
And how, I mean, you've been at Brown so long, you know, over 60 years. What would you say, how's it changed over the years?
that's a hard question to answer because the obvious answer is, uh, well, we're getting better students and the courses are more advanced. But what that implies is the people who graduated from Brown 20 years ago uh, weren't so good, and the courses weren't so good. And I don't mean to say that, but I think there's clearly a very strong set of students. Um, I don't think it's changed very much since the initiation of the new curriculum. It's changed a whole lot compared to what it was in 1959. Um, but I think now it's the same, only more so, as you might say. We're getting these people who've done really very exciting things
Mm,
in their life before they came to Brown, and I think have come to Brown because they think they can continue to do exciting things. Uh,
yeah, no, I agree. It's so, I say that a time period, eh, students today, I'm sure over the years, it's gotten so much more competitive to get into these schools. So they have to be so much better prepared, and they have tightened up, say, high school resumes. They're the top of their class. Maybe, yeah, 60 years ago, it was perhaps a little bit. It was, I would say, definitely easier to get in. The level of competition was a little bit different, and now it's just it's different. It's a different ball game, right?
yeah, right. I can't help but thinking it puts pressure on our students, especially first year students, when
Mm,
they realize that behind them are uh, 6, 8 students that didn't get in here, and I think it does. Hate to say, encourage people to work a little harder and be a little more responsible.
Mm. Yeah. Can you notice any other big differences between, say, students like in this century versus the last one? Any difference
Yeah.
besides the sort of, say, the level of intelligence or preparation? Any other differences in the students today?
Yeah, I mean, there was a time when you had to teach spreadsheets
Mm.
and word processing in class, and now the students know more about how to use the computer than I do, and it's a
Mm.
good thing. And I think that the easy availability of knowledge and ideas which we get from computers and uh, uh, cell phones really have made people much more aware of what's going on in society. I don't think it's a Brown student that doesn't know about global warming and
Mm.
hasn't thought about it.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah, a more well-rounded, or more well-rounded knowledge base, perhaps, and also with the easy access to technology, um, perhaps the onus on like memorization, or having to, it might be sort of more of an emphasis today on the thought process rather than the rote memorization, right?
Right, and I think it's a good thing that's what you really should be doing in college is not learning techniques, but learning to generalize from them and to understand the implications of what what the spreadsheet is telling you, what these techniques are saying. Uh, and we can go on like this. All of a sudden, the instructor stops being uh, uh, sort of conveyor of knowledge, but the instructor becomes sort of, I hate to use the word manager, who helps the student learn on her own or his own. Uh, I don't mean to talk too much, but let me make another observation. Uh, I don't think you really can teach anybody anything. I think all
Mm.
you can do is motivate them to want to learn on themselves and then structure the material so it's easier for students to organize it in their own mind. Uh,
Mm.
and I think you see where I'm getting at that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I absolutely do. I think it reminds me of, I'm an uncle to, I have a niece and two nephews. They're 8, 9, and 10. And if anytime I'm trying to teach them something, uh, if they get a sense that I'm teaching, they kind of zone out.
Yeah, that's
But if
right.
it's
That's right.
fun,
Yeah.
if it's a fun game and I'm teaching them without them knowing about it, then they're really happy to do it. They're really
Yeah.
jazzed about it, and they can learn a lot that way. But it's funny how we have to deceive them, not deceive them, but like it's this thing of like pulling them along with by their interest, and then as they follow their interest, they can hopefully have their minds expanded into a bunch of different areas and learn a lot of different things. But I can imagine that perhaps this is one difference. This is what I would imagine. I'm not sure, but if you go back, say early in your career, there may have been students who were, I won't say self-motivated, but they may have just kind of not been along for the ride. I'm trying to get at here. Sort of students a long time ago wouldn't need to be, say, entertained, or wouldn't need to be, say, spurned by their own curiosity. They were perhaps like set more on a direct path and kind of just
Yeah.
did things because they had to. It was an
Yeah.
obligation. Is that true?
Yeah. It's definitely true. You used to hear often, is it going to be on the exam? And if it's not going to be on the exam, then I'm going to zone out.
Yeah.
And I hear a lot less of that now. Uh,
Mm. Wow, yeah, that's cool. That's good to know that there
yeah.
is the emphasis, because I think they get taught, and even in my time, I graduated in 2009, and a lot of the things that are emphasized from say, teachers, older students, was like, don't worry so much about the grades. Obviously, like, it takes some chances, takes some risks. That's another thing. Like, I failed to mention before, but Brown's ability to take any class, pass, fail. You can take a risk and not worry about how it's going to impact your GPA, which Brown doesn't even have, right? So,
Yeah.
yeah, all those things are great. Are there any things that you noticed students today are less prepared for than they used to be?
Well, you hear this all the time, and I'm probably just a grumpy old man, but I don't think they write as well as they used to.
Oh,
Uh,
interesting.
um, I think 140 characters sort of discouraging people to understand the structure of how to build an argument and all that. And,
Mm.
uh,
Yeah, that's interesting. Hmm.
yeah,
So do you feel like that's something that needs to be more emphasized in primary education?
yeah, I guess so. You hate to blame somebody else in the in the industry, but it does seem like. I mean, I hate to say that it does seem like the people in the high schools are saying, "Well, we shouldn't have to teach all the boring stuff. We should get a chance to do something exciting too."
Mm.
And some of that boring stuff is worth doing.
Yeah, yeah. Now, I remember when I started at Brown, my writing ability was just like far below, I think, the average, let's say, but it really helped me out over the years. It improved quite a bit, and I took some like English classes, and I got some feedback from folks, and I've gone back and read some of those old papers, and I'm like, wow, this was the difference from year one to the latter years. It's
Yeah,
pretty
who was that
huge.
kid?
Yeah, who was that? Yeah, it's
Yeah.
yeah, 15 plus years ago for me. So let's see. And then another thing, what was it like during the pandemic? Were you teaching then?
Oh yeah. Well, I sort of can't remember the time schedule, but I think for maybe 3 semesters, we were basically online, and Zoom isn't so bad with the two of us going back and forth, but when you've got 40 or 50 students,
Mm,
it really is a different experience. 40, 50, or 100 students in the classroom, you can look around quickly and see what the reaction is, and uh, whether what you're saying is making sense. That's very hard for me to do on Zoom.
mm,
Um, and we could talk about this a long time, but it seems to me that undergraduates are, especially male undergraduates, are really at a very vulnerable is too strong a word, but their life is changing a lot, and on the one hand, they're trying to get away from their families, and they should get away from their families, but they still would like to have an adult as part of their life, as reassurance and as somebody to just chat with. Uh, and that was very hard remote. Uh,
mm. Interesting. Yeah, trying to advise, like trying to be um, a sounding board for ideas. I know one of the things that you're so well known for is just your open office hours. How you'd have, I mean, I remember when I was there, I'd come in and, like you said, you have the classes of like big lecture halls of 100 plus 100, 200 students. And yet I feel like so quickly you pick up on everyone's names and you're seeing me in the hall and you're saying, hey, Carlos. And the difference it makes to have, a legend at Brown, knowing your name and recognizing you in the hallway and shaking your hand when you respond and you have an insight in class. It makes a huge difference. It makes all the difference.
yeah, because I think some sense of self-confidence and some sense on the part of a student to feel that he or she makes a difference, I think is really very important.
Hmm. Another big difference you made in the world. Can you talk about, a really adventurous spirit, what it was like teaching and setting up colleges in Africa?
Well, it clearly was different. Clearly, they were a lot of students that really had been trained in a very rigid and uh, authoritarian way. Uh, but it didn't take very long for them to sort of catch on to a more flexible and a more autonomous uh, technique or strategy. I'm sorry to bore you, but
It's not boring. This is great.
one quick anecdote. Uh, you probably remember we used to have discussions about when the final exam was going to be, and
Yeah.
and obviously I could have set the final exam, but I thought there were pedagogical reasons why it's good for the students to have control. So
Mm.
I was doing the same thing. I think this was in Malawi, which is a smaller country in Africa, and one of the students in the front row says, "We're wasting time. Just tell us when you want the exam." And two or three students in the next one says, "No, no, he's doing just exactly what he told us we ought to do."
Mm.
Uh,
Yeah, like teaching by example, giving people the
yeah,
autonomy, and
right.
that's what I mean. That's something that you emphasized, I think, in your courses, your management courses, was that you have to give people the freedom to make choices at work and give them as much freedom as they can handle, basically, to do their jobs on their own, not micromanage,
Yeah.
etc. And that'll free up everyone's time, right, in the long run.
Yeah, and I think people can handle a lot of freedom.
Mm,
You hear lots of criticism from others. Well, you give the students freedom, and they'll goof off, or they'll not take it seriously. And that's not been my reaction at all. Most of them, well, just like yourself, get interested, involved, and I think the word ownership is really important. Uh,
mm. Yeah, I agree.
I
I
mean,
agree with you on that.
they're not dumb. They know that they're going to graduate, and they're going to have to be able to do something after they graduate. And,
Mm.
uh,
Sure. And just a couple more questions about what was like setting up these engineering programs in Africa. What was it like? I mean, that big decision to bring your family. Your family went with you, right? I mean, you brought them over there, I believe.
oh yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So
Uh,
how did everybody take it? What was it like raising your kids there? What was their experience like?
Oh, I hate to say it, but they loved it. A minor reason was that almost every place in the world you want to go to is between here and Southern Africa. So we used to spend a week, 2 weeks going through Europe and
Mm,
seeing different parts of the world. Um, and expatriate children, once they understand that they're not supposed to be always dealing with expatriates, but they're supposed to be making friends with local people, it really was a ball for them.
mm,
Also, it
absolutely.
didn't snow. Uh,
A little bit easier in that regard. Yeah, I don't have to do any shoveling or anything like that in the winter. No,
yeah,
I get it. I grew up in Massachusetts. I grew up in Dartmouth, Mass. So very close to Providence. Yeah, half an hour drive to Providence. So yeah, I grew up with
yeah.
that inclement weather
Four
all
inches
the time.
yesterday.
4 inches. Oh, geez, I didn't know it was that much. I'm in New York City, so we barely got anything. I think it all melted
Yeah,
overnight. Uh, cool. So yeah, one thing I'd love to sort of shift towards a little bit here is, of course, your big courses, the courses I took, their management courses, Engine 9 and 90. Um, the big quote I always heard was like, it's the closest thing to business classes at Brown because Brown doesn't have a business school and Brown doesn't want one. But they always say
Yeah,
that kind of like, we don't want one, but this is
yeah.
the offering that you have. Um, can you share some of the overarching themes you've recognized over the years in teaching, and some of the lessons from, say, management strategy, business, that have kind of like stood the test of time, what you think are, say, the top lessons?
Well, a couple of points. I'm not sure. Really, yeah. One is, I think management is a liberal art that
Mm,
it encompasses all the things that you really want in the liberal arts. Understanding about people, understanding certainly history. As you remember, most of those cases actually had an aesthetic component in there. Remember, we started with a dance case, and
yeah.
the protagonist really wanted to put beautiful things on the dining room table of the people in America. And certainly a whole lot of ethical questions come up in management. So I think you see what I'm getting at,
Mm,
that you fish where the fish are. And if the students are
mm,
interested in management and students are interested in business, then we can use that interest as a vehicle to awaken curiosity in lots of other areas. Right? Am
mm.
I making sense?
Yeah, you are. Absolutely. Yeah. And I think I may have heard it in an interview you gave once, or um, perhaps there's an article that I read, something to the degree that and perhaps this is probably, I'm sure this has changed over the years, but perhaps early on, some other Brown professors maybe like looked down on this kind of, this, like, I say non-theoretical, but this rather like pragmatic, real world stuff that you're teaching in college, that they think, students should get some other set of skills. But I clearly think, I mean, most students are going to graduate and have to enter the working world, right?
Yeah,
So
that's right.
why
Yeah.
not one or two courses that afford them, the ability to get their hands a little dirty and learn a little bit about business? I think it's great.
Yeah, and I think I don't know how to say this nicely. There is a sort of actually, I'm embarrassed saying this, a jealousy, a fear that our jobs are going to be taken away, and I don't think courses like Engine 9 or 90 really take uh, students away from uh, economics or religious studies or something like that, but gives them
Mhm.
another perspective. One of the purposes of a liberal arts education, it seems to me, is to help a student understand the world that he or she is facing,
Mm,
and you really can't understand the world unless you have some sense of how management works. Um,
mm,
and I think another purpose of liberal arts education is to help students understand their own interests and their own desires. And people who've never uh, been involved with managing an organization don't realize in some cases it can be a lot of fun. And the converse, especially true to the students who take this stuff and say, I don't want to do this at all. I really want to do hardcore uh, physics or hardcore classics or
yeah.
something like that.
Mhm.
But at least one course out of 32 allows them to try things out.
Yeah, it certainly did for me. And I actually remember, um, for folks, most of the people listening to this, my audience, they may not know what the course is about. But one of the things we did in Engine 9 was we have, and also for 90, I believe, Harvard Business School case studies that we discuss in class, but also we have breakout sections of small groups of students, about, I don't know, a dozen, 10 students or so. And I remember specifically one case study, because we almost always disagreed, which was great. Healthy disagreement is what you kind of want for sort of an ambiguous case, for people to make their arguments and kind of have a good playful debate. But there was one case study that we had in this group that we all agreed on together that the company was making a terrible business decision. We said, this is the wrong choice. We cannot believe what they're doing, right? And the case study was Marvel coming out with these cinematic universe movies. Iron Man, Ant-Man. We were all like,
Yeah.
who wants to watch a movie about an ant? This is, I
Yeah,
swear to
yeah,
God,
right.
this is back in 2006, 2005, right? And of all the case studies, we could not have been more wrong
Yeah,
about the
right.
direction that this company went in. But back then, we had no vision for what this could be. And alas, it's one of the greatest, probably the greatest cinematic products in entertainment history, right? This universe that they built up. So I thought that was kind of funny.
Yeah. Well, teaches you humility anyway.
Yeah, well, now we can look back on it and say, oh, oy vey, we kind of screwed that one up. But that's why we discuss these things and try to figure them out. One big trend I'd love to get your thoughts on is coming from because of the pandemic and also post-pandemic. What is your take on how the like work from home dynamic is going to change business and management in the near and long-term future?
Well, I think it's a very good question, and I don't really have much insight except that the old song of how are you going to keep them down the farm after they've seen Paris, and I think a lot of people are finding working from home is just much more convenient, partly because you don't
Mm,
commute, but partly because you can sort of structure your time and your space the way you want it. So I think it's going to be very hard to get people to come in 5 days a week and sort of be there.
right.
Uh,
Yeah.
and the obvious concern is missing these informal conversations that give you new ideas and new uh, perspectives. And I think organizations have just got to figure a way to get that coordination and integration back.
Mm,
Uh, yeah, yeah,
yeah.
yeah, yeah, and you talk about families with young children. It seems to me working from home has just been a savior for a lot of these.
Yeah, no,
Uh,
absolutely. Yeah, it's gonna be interesting to see how it shakes out. There's a big impact on sort of like city life, obviously, corporate real estate's taking a massive hit, of course. But not only that, the businesses that surround them, like I said, I live in New York City, and you talk to these businesses that are dependent on commuters coming in and the secondary kind of markets that
yeah,
spring from that. Um, and even something like hybrid models where it's say like half in the office, half out of the office. That really does like change these dynamics entirely. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens going forward. And also things like productivity and probably things around. I imagine kind of keeping the trains running on time is something that you can kind of maintain and can kind of stick around, but let's say you're trying to make big seismic shifts in a company, you're trying to innovate, you're trying to do things moving forward. I'd say it's got to be harder to do that in a virtual kind of setting because you're missing a lot of the in-person flavor that you'd otherwise get.
yeah. I think short term, it's working from home certainly is more productive, but you worry very much, as you say, about the long term consequences, and also say nicely loyalty to the organization.
Mm,
If you get in once a week or once every other week, that's not really a commitment
mm,
to the place. And
absolutely. Um, this is another question. What do you think will be, say, the biggest technology innovation? What will change our lives the most, do you think, in the near future?
I guess it's going to be AI
Mm,
in a general sense. The more things that you can do. Uh, with technology, it's going to change what happens a lot. You know, some article about manufacturing that manufacturing used to be cutting metal and screwing things together, but all that can be automated. And so, what's exactly the role of a person? You know, it's easy to say that all these new technologies historically have brought in new jobs and made more opportunities for people. But there is a time span, and I do worry about somebody in their 50s, their 60s, and what are they going to do for a job?
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, artificial intelligence, it's definitely an interest of mine. I've done like a video on like the implications, like some of the dangers perhaps of artificial intelligence. I know that's a very sort of different perspective or frame to
No,
take
I
on it
think there's
versus it.
a lot of differences, a lot of dangers. I mean, partly because people take it too seriously. Your number comes out of the computer, and that must be right. And you know, the expression "garbage in, garbage out," and people don't really realize where that number came from. You know, the standard example is face recognition patterns that don't recognize people with dark skin.
Right. Sure. Okay. So we have some of those. I'd love to cover off on a couple of like side questions, side things I learned from your background. That you wrote papers, I believe this was early in your career, on digital logic, technology transfer, obviously in engineering, circuit design, that kind of thing. It looked like too have you completed a second edition of your book, Field Guide to Appropriate Technology? I think you were going to try to do that this year.
Sorry, what was the question? It was about
Oh,
appropriate technology.
yeah, you had well, you published a book, I believe it was like 20 years ago. It's called Field Guide to Appropriate Technology.
Right. Yeah.
And then you were going to come out with a second edition of that book. Or maybe you did this year or you're coming out in
And
the
I
future.
haven't, you know, we're still trying to get people organized and on the second edition. Um, Yeah, appropriate technology. Not too rude, actually. There are two books. One is the field guide, which is meant for practitioners out there, and the other is a textbook uh, for an undergraduate class, which I did teach at Brown and is taught at some other institutions. Appropriate technology is small-scale technology that's user-friendly and accessible, and doesn't use a lot of capital resources. You know, the medical field, it's having a network of health centers throughout the country, and then a relatively small number of Western trained doctors, so that most people will go to the clinic, and then the people with serious illnesses will be referred uh, up the ladder to more and more specialized physicians.
Mhm.
Am I making sense at all? Yeah,
Yeah, I think so. I didn't actually know what the book was about, so this is helpful
yeah,
to
yeah.
get some context. So it's mostly appropriate technology. Is it just the medical field that this book covers, or is it?
No, no, no. You know, for energy, what it's getting at is put your own solar panel up on the roof, build your own uh,
Mm,
uh, windmill in food. It's close to family farming rather than the big agribusiness.
gotcha.
And
Cool.
you know, it's a couple of reasons why I think it's interesting. One is, of course, uh, it takes the decision making down to the level that lots of people are making decisions about they want to do. The original argument was for jobs that instead of having a huge factory or distribution center, with 2 or 3 people running the whole thing, that you would have lots of people finding interesting and challenging work.
Yeah, that's
Am I
great.
making sense?
Yeah, you are. Yeah, I'd love to try to find that book and get into it myself, actually. And one other thing I found, this was from a long time ago, but this is a paper from 1963 that you wrote. I couldn't find the paper because I looked all over for it, but I don't have access, institutional access. But it's called Regular Expressions in Variable Length Encodings, which was in this journal called IEEE Transactions on Information Theory. Do you remember anything about that paper?
Oh yeah, obviously regular expressions are a form of well, sort of a code for describing how particular devices work. And so the question is, can you manipulate the code to minimize the number of circuit components, rather than having to build and all that. It was a very, very early stages of automatic design that we're just now getting into it, where the engineer just has to specify what the device is going to do, and then the computer will take those ideas and put them into a circuit. That's a long time ago.
Yeah, I know, but I still think it's interesting. And actually, information theory, one of the things I want to cover on my channel, and my YouTube channel, I think I sent you my interview I did with Dr. Gregg Henriques, the psychology professor. But so I do sort of these podcast interviews with experts, but I also want to cover and do explainer videos. And I've done some explainer videos on different topics in, say, like psychology, some in sort of metaphysics, that kind of area. But information theory, which is papers in an information theory journal, like it's one of the, say an underappreciated area of discipline, with like, say, coming out of Claude Shannon's work at Bell Labs. I think there's a lot there that's certainly not taught to people. I didn't know about information theory until the last couple of years, and I'm a very curious person. This is kind of area where I figure I would have stumbled upon this at some point in time, but no, it's just been in say the last couple of years that I've learned about information theory broadly, and I want to do some like explainer type of videos for folks interested in that area.
Yeah, because we sort of know about material theory and electrical theory, but information is just as important as electricity or physical pieces.
Yeah. Cool. Now, and just a couple of quick ones. I know you have to go at 10, so I'm going to let you go in a couple of minutes. But if you don't mind, a couple quick ones. Well, one is something kind of fun I do. Do you mind if I turn you into a cartoon for this for just like a few seconds? Is that okay?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. I'll do that. It's just a little fun thing, animation thing that is fun to do. So I can turn you into a cartoon. That's cool. Do you have any favorite authors, writers?
20 years ago, I would have said F. Scott Fitzgerald. I really thought it was a great combination of desire and being lost. I'm not saying that quite right. I think now I've been started reading these science books. I'm reading one by Barford, on the 50 most important inventions, and I think I sort of like those books now. Yeah, yeah, the theme is sort of how technology affects our lives and what you
Mm,
can do to make it effective positively. Uh,
cool. Yeah, yeah. I'll check out the 50 most important inventions. I hadn't heard of that book before. Do you have any favorite movies or TV shows?
no,
All time? I mean, even in your life. I mean, not just currently, but
yeah, the trouble with COVID-19 is we stopped going to movies. We haven't gone back to
mm,
it.
mm.
Uh, Let me
That's okay.
pass. Let me read in mind.
Pass. Got it. No problem.
Yeah,
Um, and let's see.
Manchester
Perhaps.
by the Sea was interesting.
Oh, there's always. I mean, there's like one of the. It's almost a problem. A good problem to have. There's too much to choose from, so it's like hard to
Okay, yeah,
decide
right.
on something to watch.
Yeah.
Perhaps my last question here. If you could go back and give your, say, 18-year-old self one piece of advice, what would it be?
Don't worry that things work out, that what looks like it's going to be impossible to solve, in fact, a week from now is going to disappear. Uh, and I think the corollary is right. You do have an objective, do have a long range hope for what you really want to be, and a North Star, and look at that, and look at what you're doing in terms of how it's going to get you there.
Hmm,
Uh,
that's wonderful. Yeah.
when somebody asks me to write a letter to yourself like 25 or something, it must be funny, would you tell somebody about yourself at the age of 20? Uh,
Gotcha. Well,
and I think a lot of it is
yeah,
it's going to work out.
it's going to work out.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, Professor Hazeltine, this has been a wonderful conversation. I want to say thank you so much for your time and energy today. I learned a lot, and I'm sure my audience will really appreciate our conversation. Thank you.